First of all, I want to thank the Institute and the host government for allowing me to spend my weekend here in Stockholm in good company with all these great presentations and very intellectual discussion. I was asked to speak about the political mobilization in one small corner of Asia, that is the Southeast Asia. It's a region of 10 countries that is actually hard to define, except only by geography, unlike much of the Middle East or North Africa, which share similar race and religion. Southeast Asia is made up of countries with very different races, ethnicities, different cultures, religions. You know, Indonesia is the largest country with the largest Muslim population in the world. And Malaysia is also predominantly Muslims. And then, the Philippines is the largest Catholic country in Asia. And then we have Buddhist countries like Myanmar, Thailand, Vietnam, and Cambodia. They are also at very different stages of economic development and also at very different stages of democratic development. The reason why I'm citing this diversity is because what happens in one country in Southeast Asia will not necessarily impact the other countries, and this is certainly true with regards to the process of democratization. It wasn't a long time ago when all the Southeast Asian countries were ruled by authoritarian governments. Now I'm happy to say that 3 countries have democracies. Philippines started to democratize in 1986 when they got rid of Ferdinand Marcos. Thailand ended the long reign of military rules in 1992, and Indonesia in 1998 when we got rid of Suharto. The wind of change is blowing very, very slowly in Southeast Asia. The fall of each regime here had very little or no impact on its neighbors. It gave some inspiration to the local people that we have to do something similar, but it took 6 years between the people power in the Philippines to the one in Bangkok, another 6 years from Bangkok to Jakarta. Now the 3 countries, we have elections and we have the ability to replace our leaders on a frequently. The other countries, of course, they claim that they have elections, but one thing about their elections is that the outcome is almost predictable and the same party or same individual will continue to rule. So if you ask me where is the wind of freedom going to blow next in Southeast Asia, I have my money on Myanmar. I will come back to this point, but let me just talk first about the experience of the Philippines, Thailand, and Indonesia in the process of democratization. The changes were brought about by internal forces and not so much external. The increasing prosperity or welfare of the people actually was not the impetus for change. If anything, if you are growing, you are becoming prosperous, you have no interest in changing the status quo. So what happened in the Philippines, in Thailand, Indonesia, people just decided enough was enough. And if you recall, the people power in Indonesia happened actually at the peak of the Asian financial crisis. What drove this change? I think I have to pin it down to the civil society organizations in these countries. They were very central in mobilizing the people for in getting the people power. And once the regime fell, the civil society continued to maintain their role, pushing for reforms and helping to write up the new constitutions and also, no less important, in keeping in check those people who were eventually elected to power and to govern. I was once asked I got a lot of questions about 5 or 6 years to go by from people from donor governments about what can we do together with regard to Myanmar because the situation at the time was getting worse. And my answer is nothing. You cannot impose change of regime. You look at Iraq, look at Afghanistan. But what we can do together is actually prepare the civil society in the event that the regime eventually falls. This is exactly what they did with Indonesia. We got a lot of helps in building our civil society so that when the Suharto regime fell, there was a strong and vibrant civil society to help maintain the progress. We had a very weak government. We had a military that was in disarray. There was indications of the breakdown of law and order, but there was a strong civil society that stepped in and helped to maintain and continue the state. And of course, the civil society organizations, we got a lot of help from foreign organizations, foreign governments. We have to recognize that. But at the end of the day, I think it's the civil society's own initiatives and efforts to make it happen. And of course, eventually, these civil society organizations, they have to be self-financing and sustainable. Many of them actually didn't survive once the money dried out or the money was being shifted to Afghanistan, Iraq. Many civil society organizations just collapsed. But some were able to maintain and then continue and became self-financing. So the real work, I think people power is fine, it's good in bringing down the regime, but I think the real work actually begins once you got rid of your tyrant. And that is the biggest challenge. A speaker yesterday mentioned with regard to the nation building in Afghanistan that it's a long way from Kabul to Copenhagen. Well, geographically, it's even longer from Jakarta to Copenhagen. But when we started the process of reforms, we did not look at Europe, Copenhagen, The Hague, London, or Paris. We looked at Thailand and we looked at the Philippines, our neighbors who had gone democratic first. And we learned lessons from them. We sent people to the Philippines to look at how they manage the press freedom. We sent people to Thailand to look at how the process of the constitutional reforms that were taking place at the time. Learning from Europe, from the West is fine, but I think it's more applicable and relevant for us to learn from our neighbors that have gone democratic. Of course, we have our setbacks. I'm not saying that democracy is perfect in any of these three countries. We call this, we are still in the process of consolidating our democracy. In the Philippines, they've gone democratic since 1986. So it has been quite a while, but it's still consolidation. And same thing with Thailand and same thing with Indonesia. We still have problems or even setbacks. But the way we look at it is now more a case of 2 or 3 steps forward and 1 step backward. There was a time when we were dancing a different dance, the one step forward and 2 steps backwards, or just 1 step forward and 1 step backward. I am happy to say that today Indonesia is a stable democracy. We have had 4 presidents since 1998, so in the last 15 years, compared with only 2 presidents in the period of 43 years since we became independent in 1945. We will have our 5th president since Suharto resigned next year, around this time next year, because we will have another election, and we have already written into the Constitution that a president cannot serve more than 2 terms. So he will have to step down, and we will definitely have a new president next year. And I'm happy to say that the economy is also doing well. So we have been able to prove that democracy and development are complementary. There was a time when people say the 2 are trade-off. You can have development, but not democracy, or the other way around. Indonesia today is often described as the 3rd largest democracy in the world after India and United States, and also the largest democracy in the Muslim world. We have our share of Islamist parties. They contest the elections. One of them actually share the same ideology as the Muslim Brotherhood, and that party is a part of it's a junior partner in the current coalition government. Although 87% of Indonesians are Muslims, but the majority of the people, they would vote for the secular nationalist parties, and very few, not more than 15 or 20% of the most, would give their votes to the Islamist parties with their Islamist agendas, like turning Indonesia into an Islamic state or introducing Sharia. And the reason for this, I think, is we have a very strong civil society Muslim organizations. I'm thinking in terms of the Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah. These are mass-based organizations with large followers. We're talking about 30, 40, 50 million people. And their job have been to keep Indonesia moderate and tolerant. And they have been able to separate, to help Indonesians see, separate the separation between religion and politics. Some people still like to mix that, but I think the majority of Indonesians say politics and religion should not be mixed. Now let me turn to Myanmar. I said that it's going to be the next Southeast Asian country to go democratic, rather than Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, Laos, or Cambodia, because once the junta opened up the space for free expression, it is very difficult to stop or to control the force or the power that it unleashed. Granted that the junta has not allowed full freedom of speech and freedom of the press, but I think it is opening up. And once it's opened up, I think people will want more, and we are already seeing that people are demanding more and more space for expression. The junta would have to be even more brutal than they were back in 1991 to stop this process. And I don't think they would. I don't believe that they would do that. Again, the pressures within Myanmar is actually coming internally. Many dissidents, including my journalist friends from Myanmar, they are returning to Myanmar, to help with the reforms, and they were in exile, so they're coming back, and they believe that there is now a future in their country. I mentioned limited impact externally, but I think one influence that forced the junta to change actually came from ASEAN because Myanmar joined ASEAN, I think, in 1998, and they had been deprived of the chairmanship of ASEAN because the other ASEAN countries would just feel embarrassed if a pariah state like Myanmar lead the organization. But they gave an incentive to Myanmar, say, look, if you open up and you start on the path of democracy, just even a small gesture, a token gesture, but one that is credible, you would be happy to give Myanmar the chairmanship of ASEAN beginning 2014. And sure enough, 2 years ago, they decided to open up, and they promised there will be an election next year. Partly because the junta wants the chair of ASEAN so badly. So the wind of change within ASEAN, within the Southeast Asia, is now also coming from ASEAN, because ASEAN, beginning in the late 2015, will become a community. And we already have a charter, the ASEAN Charter, in which we wrote in the principles and values of freedom, democracy, and human rights. But the problem with this charter is that it's non-binding, so many of the member countries are happy to sign the charter, but not necessarily implement. But I think that's fine. I think for the civil society, at least there's a document by which we can actually ask the governments to abide by their commitment within ASEAN. There is already also networking among the ASEAN civil society organizations that they want to push for more freedom. There's a network of ASEAN human rights organizations that are also pushing this development. So, okay, just one last quick point about the geopolitical impact. When the ASEAN leaders decided to turn the region into a single community, it was actually in response to the rise of China and to some extent the rise of India. This was a decision made back in 2003. And they realized that ASEAN should be more integrated to be able to rise and not be drowned out by the rise of China and India. So there was this realization that ASEAN should be more integrated. There was this pressure that ASEAN should do that. But unfortunately, there is also resistance from the governments in ASEAN against the change. And so I would not put so much hope on ASEAN, although the pressures are most welcome. But I think one thing that may change the other ASEAN countries is actually the election in Myanmar next year. If it's democratic and if it leads to a new government, the other more developed ASEAN countries would be saying, at least the people will be saying, we want the same thing. I already have friends, journalist friends from Malaysia. They are jealous of their friends of the Burmese Myanmar journalists, because they have so much freedom on what they can report, whereas in Malaysia, they have not been able to do that. So on that note, I end my presentation. Thank you.